Okay, as you can see, we've flipped the block onto its flywheel so that we can pull the front cover off. I know that this isn't really the best way to do things. I'm currently waiting on an engine stand and the adapter in order to hold the rear iron. And honestly, I just don't have the patience to wait. I'm just way too excited to get into this thing and see what's going on, especially on the front housing here. So I'm gonna just kind of forge ahead, even though I don't have the proper stuff. You know, I'm sure by the time I'm ready to reassemble this bad boy, that I will absolutely have, I already cracked all these loose, by the way. I will have everything that I need in order to properly get this thing on a stand. I'm tired of working on the floor, but it is what it is, and you do what you gotta do, so to speak. All right, so we've now moved to the back side of things, and I've already broken a few of these loose. I'm just trying to get them all broken loose so that I can come through. You can see these bottom ones are pretty rusted up. From what I understand, these guys are reusable, and my plans for this motor aren't going to be crazy. I just kind of want to do a stock rebuild. So I know that there are options out there that you can get, you know, stud kits and put those guys in. But I think for all intents and purposes, and for what I'm looking to get out of this motor, is more or less the experience and the quote-unquote joy of building a rotary. Okay, so we got all of the bolts out and we got the flywheel back on. It already looks like I'm getting a little bit of separation here. So I'm actually pretty nervous about tilting this thing up on its end. So I'm gonna grab it here and by the front and kind of shift it forward a little bit and then lean it back as gently as I can. I'm hoping that nothing catastrophic happens. I don't think it will because I still have the bolts up front holding things together. But again, hoping this will either be a learning lesson for everybody or maybe just a different and new way to do things. Okay, so far so good. You can see I did leave this hoist on just as a handle to make things a little bit easier to maneuver this thing around. I would have loved to have got this up on the workbench, but I think that I'm just further ahead at this point, just keeping things on the ground where things are safe and I don't have to worry about it. So that was what I would consider a success. I guess moment of truth, right? Let's see what happens here. Oh, yep. Didn't even need to, just had to threaten it with the hammer. And it slides right off. Initially, I don't see any super bad wear or marring or anything like that that would indicate that there are any issues with the bearings. All the oil channels look very clear. And it looks really good. Just keeps getting more exciting. We'll see as we continue down the rotary rabbit hole. There's the magical Dorito that everyone talks about. We'll pull this jacket off. Let's get some over here. Okay, we do have a little bit of staining here. You can see actually where the side seal that was stuck there for a long time, but it's just a stain. It doesn't look as though it caused any real damage to the iron, which is really good. And one of the things I've seen people do with these motors is take and pull this out and use this rubber gasket kind of as a gum band to hold the apex seals in. But me being the curious person that I am, and knowing that this front rotor was not even giving me any reading on my rotary compression tester, it just kind of tells me that I want to experiment a little bit. So since we have the flywheel on top of here, I'm just going to turn the block and take a look at how the seals are actually looking as they come across. So as I'm spinning the motor, it does look as though they're making contact with the housing pretty well, which is both good and bad. The reason that we lost compression here, I'm just finding out now, is these side seals. They are gummed up beyond belief, and they are just stuck. These should spring back out, which tells me you're just spinning air. In fact, even if you look right here and compare there to here, this one springs out, this one springs out, this one does not. So obviously I'm not going to get a good seal between here and the front iron, and none of these side seals are springing out, which that's why we lost compression, people, which is actually super cool to know that it didn't blow an apex seal, these didn't come apart, and it didn't fly apart inside the motor and then run through the exhaust and into the, you know, the turbine housing or anything like that. It's actually really exciting. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this rotor out here in a minute. So I've repositioned things a little bit just so that I can have a really good idea of how this is gonna go back together later on. And I'm sure that I'm gonna be doing a ton of homework on this and seeing what the proper ways to do things are. But I wanted the top lobe of the eccentric shaft and the top of this rotor just to be on the top side, so that whenever I take apart the bottom housing, I can tell where the bottom rotor is in relation to the top of the E-shaft lobe being up here. So again, we're just gonna lightly pull this up. We're gonna use that trick I saw online. So I'm just gonna lightly pull this up. Put these guys around the sides there, if I can get them to stay. Which I was able to. Now I can only assume that if the top, normally the seals will fall out of the back side. See how this guy's sticking out a little bit? It's got a tiny bit of spring, but these ones have none. And in fact, all the apex seals and everything stayed together in this, and that's super cool news. So that's where we are with that guy. I'm gonna set that aside. Then we can pull this housing off and take a look at the actual rotor housing. Again, these dowel pins hold stuff together, which is great whenever you're reassembling. But sometimes you need to wiggle things to get them to come apart. Just wipe off my hands here really quick. So, upon inspection of the actual housing, it's super clean, guys, which is awesome. It's just oily and dirty, you know. I don't know if I can get in there pretty close. There's a tiny bit of ever so slight chatter marks. But other than that, there's no chrome flaking, and you know, there's a little bit of carbon buildup and staining right along the sides there, and of course where you have detonation for your spark plugs. But all along the sides, these motors are sometimes known to get flaking in through here, and there's virtually none. I'm thinking that this definitely reusable. I'm really excited, and it looks like we're just gonna need some seals and get to put things back together. Very exciting. We'll move back over to the motor here, and we'll take a look at the front side of the center iron. Again, we have the same thing that we had on the front iron. You can see where this thing sat for just a really long time and just dried out and got stained up. But everything's, even though it has those marks there, it's still just got the regular wear and tear lines where the seals ride, which is just absolutely fantastic news. I'm really excited.